I went to the range with 3 Glock 19s, Gen 4, 5, and 6, and I was expecting my mind to be changed. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. Today we're going to be looking at these 3 pistols, and I want to answer a very simple question. Is the Gen 6 Glock worth the upgrade? Did they put the upgrades on the gun that actually count? And there's going to be a curveball pistol thrown in here as well that might actually be a better option than all of these. I'm going to give you my opinion. Of course, I want to hear yours, whatever it might be. Let's go ahead and jump right in. Now, I want you to know a couple of different things here. First of all, if you're looking for a sponsored segment or a hype machine for the Gen 6 Glock, or expect me not to tell you anything negative about any of these pistols, quite frankly, you found the wrong video. But if you're looking for a realistic review and tell you what actually matters here, and at least give you my opinion on these guns, then you found the right video, and that's what we're going to focus on here. But it's also not me hating just to hate, because there are some legitimate upgrades here. So let's look at those things and see how they translate at the range, right? So I have Gen 4, Gen 5, Gen 6 right here. So starting with 4, of course, we have a very traditional Glock, or what seems like traditional, but they changed a lot of things in Gen 4 specifically. They had some issues initially, but they were able to pretty much iron those things out. We might have been in year 1 or 2 when I started the channel and did the review on this gun. I still have the same Burris Fastfire 3 on this gun. It's been a workhorse. It has been the comparison gun I have used, probably more so than any other. I put the Trijicon high night sights on there. By the way, I didn't judge the fact like this optic versus the SRO. I don't want to be unfair. So I just want you to know that. Undercut under the trigger guard. Finger grooves are still present. So overall, not too bad. Now Gen 5, they did some changes and stuff. Mainly, they removed the finger grooves. This is one of the first ones. I mean, it's not an MOS version. Standard Glock sights. Same trigger, although it actually is different. I'll talk about that here in just a second. But overall, largely the same gun. Gen 6 is where they changed a lot. By the way, I did go over way more of the changes and some of the little details there in my initial video of this gun. So if you want to check that out, feel free. But essentially now what we have is front and rear slide serrations. They made those serrations in the front deeper. They cut them deeper in the front. They pretty much left them the same back here in the rear. It actually uses an updated plate system for the optics, unlike the old MOS system, so a little bit easier there. You have a much more aggressive grip texturing. Feels way better in the hand. You actually have a little bit of an extra cutout here. They angled the magazine release not only back towards you a little bit, so it makes it a little bit more accessible if you have smaller hands, but they also raised the back of that just a little bit there too. A little bit of cutout there for your thumb. Serrated up here, of course, for your indexing points, and a nice little ledge there to kind of get down on the gun. Use it as a little gas pedal when you want to run the gun a little bit quicker. Magazines still interchangeable, no finger grooves there. Double undercut under that trigger guard now, so you can get a much higher grip on the gun. Basic Glock sights there. So on paper, they actually did quite a bit. The trigger, by the way, is light years better than what I found on Gen 5 and Gen 4. But this is where the story starts to break down a little bit, because I was expecting this huge, huge difference on paper, or I guess on steel. So we shot the Gen 4 first. It's the same gun, right? Well, obviously. But it's a gun that you can put shots on target with. It works. There's nothing flashy about it. And it's overall just a really decent option. It's not the best gun out there. One thing I did notice is that the trigger blade on mine is noticeably sharp. It's got a sharp impulse when you pull it back to the rear and you're firing over and over and over. So it is something I actually noticed when I was at the range, right? Those little things, sometimes you'll notice them when you're at home, you're dry firing, whatever, but then when you get to the range, you don't notice it. Here I did notice it. Okay, it's not a deal breaker, but I just wanted to mention that. Gen 5, they smoothed that trigger out just a little bit, but overall, it's the same trigger. right? It's not the lightest thing in the world, but it still does the job. Even without an optic, it's just an overall nice gun. Right? All the magazines are compatible too, which is super nice. So then I get the Gen 6 in my hand, and I'm expecting now just an incredibly flatter shooting gun, able to keep rounds on target quicker, a little bit more accurate. I'm not the best shooter when it comes to Glocks, probably not the best shooter when it comes to any handgun, but I'm proficient in most of them. But here's what I found. I had about the same accuracy as I did with these other guns. Now, generally, I could kind of defend that and say, hey, it's a new gun, you know, there's some new things going on, but it's like the same grip angle. The trigger's better. There's not really a big learning curve from this Glock to this Glock to that Glock. On steel, I felt like I should have been shooting way better than I was. Overall, I didn't really notice that. Now, you'll notice as I'm shooting from target to target, I'm not like trying to take my time and all of that kind of stuff. I want to see what the practical accuracy is. If I have to pull this out of a holster, how am I going to do on that first shot and the subsequent shots? That's kind of how I gauge these self-defense type of pistols. And I didn't notice that it was that much better. A couple of things that I did notice that were better. Mainly the recoil impulse felt a little bit more predictable, maybe a touch more controllable. And I really would credit that to two different things. First of all, they went away from the dual recoil springs in the Gen 4 and 5. These are supposed to increase longevity. It also, with that secondary spring, can give you a little bit more unpredictability in the slide in a way, but also it's supposed to help kind of that last half of spring tension to really soak up some additional recoil. But with the single spring that they use now in the Gen 6, it gives a more predictable recoil impulse. Now, your longevity in the spring may be lessened by a little bit, but I think I actually prefer the single. It just seemed more predictable, a little less recoil, but it's not all in the spring too. Another thing they did, which is a huge upgrade here, is the grip texturing. Some of the little cutouts and stuff that they did on the texturing make the gun feel so much better in your hand. They removed the finger grooves. Another thing they did, at least on mine, on the Gen 5, there's a silly little cutout right here, and that's filled in now, so it just feels more natural. But also, you got a much higher grip on the gun. That double undercut trigger guard, of course, helps. That built-in beaver tail now really helps. It is actually quite significant. And so all of those things combined, to me, made a softer shooting gun. But it was only once I shot them, you know, side by side, right? If you were to just shoot a Gen 6, you'd be like, oh, okay, that's not too bad. So it was a little less recoil, but the grip texturing and the feel of the gun is much better. I wish the grip angle matched that feeling. I wish they kind of changed that. They don't want to change too much, I get it. But overall, that did feel a little bit better. Now, it's funny because we're doing an Alien Remus. This is a part of something we're doing special here for February. So I had a chance to shoot that gun too. Completely different animal. Just want to throw that out there. Make sure you stay tuned for that video. But overall, that was at least an upgrade that I could really feel and see at the range. So I gotta say, overall, they did a pretty nice job. Here's what bugs me. There's a gun on the market that's $100 and something cheaper, at least as far as MSRP. Actually, over $200 compared to MOS versions. I think even right now, Gen 5 and, of course, Gen 6. So $150 to $200 cheaper, has almost all of the features that people have been asking for when it comes to Glocks for so long, and in my experience has been super reliable. To be fair, I haven't run 10,000 rounds to this gun, but I've run some rounds to it, and it's done a fantastic job. That's the RXM. They ship it with steel sights, by the way, tritium in the front slide serrations that are actually usable, optics ready, uses mostly Gen 3 compatibility when it comes to Glock. Actually, it has somewhat of a better Glock-ish style safe action trigger. Not the best trigger in the world, but certainly Not any worse than what you'll find on a standard Glock. I wouldn't say it's as good as the Gen 6, but when it comes to what I'm seeing at the range, or what I've seen at the range with this gun, for self-defense purposes, it's right there. The grip texturing is by far better than Gen 4 or Gen 5. Magazine release is not. I actually like the positioning now on the Gen 6. And it uses Glock mags too, by the way. You can call it a carbon copy, but it's a better carbon copy and it's cheaper from a reputable manufacturer. This is one of those guns I look at and I'm like, you know, if I'm a new buyer and I don't own any of these guns, would I just automatically gravitate towards the Glock? Well, depending on who you listen to, probably. But if outside advice comes in and somebody that knows and has shot these guns says, hey, if you're trying to save some money, the RXM is one heck of a great option. And with a couple of the little drawbacks you get, you actually gain more positives too with this gun, plus a removable fire control unit too, which is kind of cool. No finger grooves, nothing like that. I don't know. It's a great option. Here's the thing, is Gen 6 really worth upgrading to? I want to put this example out there because this is where I start to have trouble with Glock and how I feel about them. First of all, if you don't know me, let me just say that I respect what they do. They equally serve law enforcement and civilians alike with reliable guns. Nothing fancy, just reliability, generally speaking. But when it comes to the upgrades, most of the time, they feel lazy to me. That's just my opinion. Because when you look at guns like the XDM series from Springfield Armory, those guns had some quirks, they had some issues, they weren't the best shooters in the world, right? But then they take that and they're like, okay, how can we make this better? And then they bring the Echelon, which is truly a better gun all the way around. Smith & Wesson has done that with the M&P. They've made a truly better gun all the way around. Glock, what it looked like on paper when I first got this gun, I was like, this is truly a better Glock. It's not totally different, right? It doesn't have to be, though. They made all those changes that people were asking for, and for me personally, it just did not translate. If you don't own any Glock, is it worth going Gen 6? I would say yes. It comes with a lot of nice features and upgrades. But if you already own a Gen 5, that's kind of the sweet spot for me, especially if you already have the MOS version. But if you're more on a budget, but you like Glock accessories and even grip angle to an extent, not exactly the same, but you want to save some money and you want to get into the Glock world, that RXM does everything that all three of these guns, four of these guns do, and more, and you could buy yourself one heck of a nice optic to throw on that gun. This didn't change my mind. I thought it was going to be significantly better, in my opinion. It wasn't significantly better, just a little bit. But that's just my opinion. Of course, I'd love to hear yours. Let me know what you think down below. If you like what I do, consider subscribing. See you in the next one, and as always, hold 'em down.